Alrighty, a little bit of business to get to before we do the video. So I put out Discover Town of Salem about a week ago. We're going to copy the URL. I promised that someone who left a comment would be getting a free copy on Steam. So we're going to load the comments. We only had 8 comments. Hooray! Randomly pick a winner. I love when I do games that aren't World of Tanks and people basically don't comment or dislike the video, but we've got Nameless X. Congratulations, pretty cool. Okay, Nameless X, I'm going to be sending you a key for the Steam version of Town of Salem. I hope you enjoy it. It's a game I've actually gotten into. It's a lot of fun once you understand it, and I hope you enjoy it. So congratulations, dude. So after a 2.5 week break from World of Tanks, part because of burnout and part because life, yeah, I decided to load up World of Tanks again and play some games and see what would happen. So this is a new toy you have not seen me in before. It's an M103. It does have the upgraded turret, but it doesn't have... I'm still using the stock engine and I'm still using the second gun. It's not the final gun. But I decided the tank was playable. But yeah, took a 2-week break from World of Tanks, and this is the first game and the very first shot I fired on returning to the game. Has my look streak disappeared, or has it come back? Oh, yes, yes, yes. Oh, thank you, sir. Thank you, sir. I really do think the game is fixed. You know, you take a 2.5 week break, and that's the first shot you fire, and it's World of Tanks saying, "Welcome back, Irish. We missed you." Hi folks, and welcome to the Ace Tanker for the Lorraine 15550, the Tier 7 French artillery. I forgot what nation it was for a moment, you silly Irishman. Yeah, so Lorraine 15550, it's an arty replay, but, you know, like a lot of my arty replays, it's not just sit at the back of the map and fire. I do get down and dirty towards the end, and there's no better tank for getting down and dirty in than the Lorraine 15550, because it is incredibly fast. It's got a power-to-weight ratio of about 20 horsepower to ton, and it gets up to 60 kilometers an hour. So when I go into shotgun mode in this tank, I've actually been having quite a bit of fun. So yeah, I mentioned on a recent video that this was one of my new toys. I bought it to get the Ace, and I'm grinding up French arty at the moment, even though I'm not particularly a fan of arty gameplay. But yeah, new toy, and this is the Ace game. Now, I'm going to say something very, very controversial here for all of those who hate arty. The Lorraine 15550 is probably the most balanced arty in the game, in my opinion. This arty is incredibly balanced. And why am I saying that? Well, I'm going to go into that in a moment, but if you were to go onto the World of Tanks forums, or even just Google and do a search for Lorraine 15550, you're going to find dozens and dozens and dozens of threads where people, arty players, are calling this the worst arty in the game, the worst tank in the game. Arty players seem to hate this arty. I mean, everyone else is going to hate this if they hate arty anyway, but even arty players hate the Lorraine 15550, and I find that very surprising because, yes, on paper, this is probably one of the worst arties in the game. It's definitely probably the worst Tier 7 arty in the game, but it's also the most balanced arty in the game. So if you're not an arty player and you hate arty, you probably hate me for saying this is balanced because it's arty, and if you are an arty player, you're probably going to hate me because, you know, you think this is a terrible tank, and I'm saying that it's not. I'm saying it's balanced. So yeah, as I'm probably going to get some hate for that, but I'm going to explain why I think this is the most balanced arty in the game, even though technically speaking most people reckon it's the worst arty in the game, in a moment. But first of all, the history. Thankfully this is a prototype, so there isn't a lot of history. First time I'm talking about this tank on the channel, so I need to go into a little bit of detail. But yeah, the Lorraine 15550 gets its name from the fact it comes with a 155mm gun, and the design for this tank was drawn up in 1950. Now, the prototype wasn't completed till 1952, but the Lorraine 15550 comes with 155 gun, built by Lorraine, and it began production, or began design phase, in 1950. So completed in 1952 alongside its sister, the Lorraine 15551, which is the same tank. In fact, the only difference between the Tier 7 arty and the Tier 8 arty in-game, Tier 8 being the Lorraine 15551, is that the chassis was different. The chassis, or the gun you can see here, is mounted in the middle of the chassis, the Lorraine 40T chassis. The gun's in the middle here, and on the Lorraine 15551, which began design in 1951 and was finished in 1952, the gun was moved to the front of the chassis, so it's more forward-facing. But that is the only difference between the two tanks. They're exactly the same tank, designed by the same company at the same time with the same gun. It's pretty much exactly the same. The only difference is the position of the gun and the chassis design. But yeah, so the Tier 7 and Tier 8 in-game are basically the same tank with a slightly different chassis. Now, these tanks were built on the experimental Lorraine 40T chassis, and the Lorraine 40T was kind of a heavy tank, light or medium tank hybrid, again built at the same time. In fact, all three tanks, the Lorraine 40T, the Lorraine 15550, and the Lorraine 15551, were all built as prototypes and all tested in 1952, and all three failed the tests due to technical difficulties or technical problems, of which I haven't been able to find out exactly what those technical problems were, but it's late and I'm tired and I haven't gone into that much research. But basically all three prototypes failed for one reason or another, and basically Batchat were also designing similar artillery, but artillery that had turrets. So the French government decided to go with Batchat instead of Lorraine, and this is why these tanks never made it beyond prototype. But that's pretty much for the history. Thankfully, there isn't very much there. And the reason I think it's one of the most balanced arty in the game, even though a lot of arty players hate it, is I suppose the first thing is the gun. This tank comes with 155mm. Now, it's not a great 155mm, but the stock gun is identical, almost identical to the final gun. So you've got a 155mm stock gun and you've got a 155mm final gun. The difference between the two is negligible, and the main difference between the two of them is basically the second type of premium ammo here, because the stock gun comes with the HE as its standard ammunition, and it's identical to this. Now, I'm using the final gun, and that's why you can see 3 ammo choices here, but stock gun only has 2 ammo choices. It has standard HE, which only has 90mm of penetration and 950 damage, which might seem a lot, but not compared to other Tier 7 arty, and it's one of the reasons people hate this tank. And the splash radius is tiny, really, really small splash radius. I have hit shots directly beside Tier 5s and done 0 damage to them with this particular gun. So, yep, the stock gun and the final gun have exactly the same standard ammo. The final gun also has exactly the same ammo as the stock gun with regards premium ammo, in that it's heat. 185mm of penetration sounds great, but like a lot of arty, the great balancing factor is you get far less alpha damage. You get 720 alpha damage with the heat. I don't understand why so many arty have their premium ammunition nerfed as regards the damage, the alpha damage, but they can't do the same for regular tanks in-game. It would make it a lot more balanced. arty seems to be more balanced with regards premium ammunition than other tank types, because you got far less alpha damage even though you've got more penetration. So, yep, they're the 2 types of ammo you get with the stock gun. No difference between those and the final gun. The only difference ammo-wise to the final gun is you get a second type of premium ammunition, which is HE. Now, as you can see, the difference between the premium ammunition and the regular ammunition is almost 0. You've got the same penetration, same damage, but the burst radius is just 1.5 meters bigger, which is nothing. Again, it's still terrible, especially for artillery. 5 meter burst radius with premium ammunition. Most regular Tier 7 arty get 5 meters of burst damage with their standard ammo. So, yeah, that's why I don't bother firing any premium HE on this tank. It's just pointless, because you just have no splash in the tank in the first place. So, upgrading the gun basically gets you an extra type of ammunition, which you may or may not use, that has burst radius that is bigger than the standard ammunition, but still tiny, a tiny improvement for the cost of the shell. The other benefit of upgrading the stock gun to the final gun, even though it's almost identical, is that the aim time, or the accuracy, is 0.02% better. 0.02 accuracy better, which is, again, unnoticeable. The accuracy buff is tiny. It's so small you're probably not going to notice it between the stock gun and the final gun. The only thing you might notice is the aim time. So the aim time on the stock gun is 7 seconds, and the aim time on the final gun is 6.5 seconds. So you get half a second quicker aim time, which is nice, but again, you know, you're not really going to notice it. When I upgraded the gun on this tank, I noticed absolutely no difference between the final gun and the regular gun. The artillery handled just the same, so upgrading the gun doesn't give this tank any real benefit whatsoever. One of the things I think makes it balanced. Another reason I think the Lorraine 15550 is balanced for an arty is the fact that a lot of arty players hate it. They think it's the worst arty in the game, and the reason is its DPM is the worst of all the tier 7 arty. Absolutely no idea why, but its DPM is the worst. But the DPM is bad, the penetration is not good. In fact, you know what, it looks quite impressive here. Ooh, it's 90mm of penetration. That's only 2mm less than the M12 or the GW Panther. So in fact, in reality, the penetration on the Lorraine 15550 is terrible, especially compared to the French or the Russian guns. Only the Crusader 5.5 inch SP is worse at 70. So the Crusader has terrible penetration compared to any of the other arties, but definitely the Lorraine 15550's penetration is not good. I have failed to pen KV1s with this gun. This gun fails to pen so often. It's just terrible. Even when you're hitting lightly skinned targets, the gun just does not pen. Now sometimes you get lucky, sometimes does pen, but usually even against lower tier tanks, this tank, when it hits the enemy tank directly, it does about medium tank damage. It does about 200, 300 damage. It rarely does above that unless it pens, and it very, very rarely pens. A huge balancing factor in my opinion, and even if it miraculously manages to pen the enemy tank, look at the alpha damage. I mean, 950 seems a lot, but you got to remember you're very rarely going to pen in this tank, and even though it's got roughly the same gun, or even a gun that's higher caliber than some of the other arty, the alpha damage is incredibly low. I mean, only the Crusader has less alpha damage and less penetration, but 950 compared to 1250 on the M12 or 1200 in the GW Panther, or nearly 2000 on the Russian arties. You know, there's I don't know why the alpha is so bad on this tank. Now the rate of fire is not too bad. The Crusader has a beaten. The rate of fire isn't too bad in the tank. The reload isn't too bad. Again, it's not the best, but it's not the worst. It's not terrible, but the alpha damage and the penetration is. And as I say, it's a big surprise when you consider this is 155mm. The M12 gets 155mm and does 1250 damage. The GW Panther gets 150mm. It's a smaller caliber gun, but does 1200 damage. And then the Russian guns are just huge, do huge damage. And you know, even the Crusader SP, it's 139mm, and yet it does almost the same alpha damage. So I don't know why the alpha damage is so bad in this tank, but it's one of the reasons people absolutely hate it. Moving on to another reason why this is a terrible arty, but also the most balanced, is the aim time. Is not good. It's not bad. You know, it's again, on paper, it's the best aim time of any of the arty up here, but again, the difference between aim time of all the tier 7 arties, not that big. I mean, it's only slightly faster than the GW Panther, but the accuracy is also amongst the worst. I mean, only the Russian arty are worse accuracy-wise. 0.73 accuracy is terrible, especially when you consider against the M12, the Panther, and the Crusader. It's got terrible accuracy for an arty. Even the gun dispersion is terrible. I mean, most of the other arty are equal or better. So moving the tank, moving the gun, the accuracy is worse on the Lorraine 15550 than any of the other tanks, with the exception of the M12. So again, the tank is the worst. The gun elevation is terrible, absolutely terrible. The Lorraine 15550 has absolutely no shell velocity or shell trajectory. It finds it very difficult to hit enemy tanks that are hiding behind rocks because it can't loop its shells. The shells fire in a very flat trajectory, and that makes it very balanced for an arty compared to other arty types. And not only is the shell trajectory very flat, the tank also gets 0 gun depression, which means that when you're going into shotgun mode, it's very difficult to get your gun on target, especially if there's a small slope or a rise on the ground, because you've got 0 gun depression. Even if you're sitting at the back, or as an arty usually does, and you decide to move your tank up onto a rise, all of a sudden you can't hit enemy tanks on the other side of the map because the gun elevation or depression is so bad. Your gun is just pointing too far up in the air. You've got to reverse back down, get your tank on flat ground in order to get a shot on target. So the gun depression is the worst. The shell velocity or shell trajectory is the worst. The gun traverse, look at this, the gun traverse is not the worst, but it's definitely not it's definitely not one of the best. 3 of the enemy arty or 3 of the other arty up here have better gun traverse speed. The top speed of the tank is good at 60 kilometers an hour. The horsepower to weight ratio is good. The horsepower is good. So this is a fast maneuverable tank. The ground resistance is good. I mean, it's not the best. Again, it's average. The turret traverse speed, well, that's the gun traverse speed because this tank really doesn't have a turret, is okay, but still not amazing. Tank traverse, the tank turns like an absolute brick, but it still turns better than most of the other arty up here. The armor is nothing special. In fact, most of the other arty have the armor beaten. The engine has got worse health than any of the other tanks up here. Very easy to knock out the engine with shots. And look at this, it's got the worst view range. It's got the worst view range of all the tier 7 arty, even though it's the fastest tank, or fastest arty, most maneuverable arty of all of them. It's got the worst view range, so it gets nerfed there as well. Yeah, the camo rating, again, definitely not amongst the best, and it's not amongst the worst. The camo rating is nothing special on the tank either. So really, the tank is very balanced for exactly the same reasons that people hate the tank, or at least arty players hate this arty. Basically, the alpha damage is terrible, the penetration is not good, the aim time or the accuracy is terrible, amongst the worst. The shell trajectory is terrible, the gun depression is terrible, the view range is terrible, the camo rating isn't very good. I mean, there's very little to like about this arty. Oh, and as I say, the stock gun and the final gun, there's almost no difference between the two of them, so upgrading the gun really doesn't improve the tank very much at all. So yeah, I think the Lorraine 15550 is one of the most balanced arty as a result. We're here on Mines. This is the Ace Tanker game. Sorry for going on about that very much, but yeah, I mean, a lot of people hate this tank, and as much as I recognize the fact that it's not a very good arty, I actually enjoy playing it because when I play it, it feels balanced. So I was going to go down to A1, and then I suddenly realized that here on Mines, we've got no one going island, it's a standard game, our team are lemming training the hill, and there's no point in going over to the A1 line because enemy scouts or light tanks are just going to have a field day over there. So I come over into a position I have never ever used in an arty before, and we're just going to see if we can get shots. So I'm reversing my tank up a slight rise at the back of the map, simply so that the gun depression doesn't affect me too much, and you can see I've got a red line here. I've got to wait for tanks to advance, and there we go. So 260 damage, so that was a bit of a splash shot, and I'm quite surprised the damage was quite high, but you can see that I'm going to have major problems shooting these tanks because this rock's in the way, and this arty has almost no shell trajectory. It is almost impossible to shoot over objects, and that's one of the reasons it would be so balanced. There we go, hitting rocks. So I think if every arty in the game got 0 gun depression, just like the Lorraine has, if they got exactly the same shell trajectory, so they had difficulty shooting over objects, arty would be a far more balanced class. Not only that, but the alpha damage is a lot lower on this than it is on most other tanks. Now, that's a kill, but it was only 209 damage, and it was on a tier 7 heavy. So, nothing spectacular here. I'm a tier 7 in a tier 8 game, so I'm not top tier. But just looking for shots, doing the standard arty thing. We've got tanks to my left, tanks in the middle, and come on. And that's another miss, 298. So, yeah, in fact, that was a hit. There was no crater left on the ground, so that was 298 with a shot on the T-54 Mod 1. Or maybe it wasn't. There is a crater there now, so... But yeah, this arty, it doesn't do the alpha damage, and when you fail to pen enemy tanks, it's like getting hit by a medium tank, a tier 7 medium tank, or maybe a tier 8 medium tank. So the alpha damage and the penetration are definitely not good. So this T-34 is doing very, very well side scraping, just waiting for him to make a mistake, but it doesn't seem as if he wants to. This KV-85, there we go. So, I'm only on 1,000 damage so far, but none of my shots have been over 300 damage. And again, having difficulty trying to get shots over this rock. So, yeah, if all arty had the shell trajectory, had the zero gun depression, had the accuracy, I mean 0.79 or 0.73 accuracy is terrible, especially for tier 7 arty. There we go. So that shot goes way to the right. Yeah, the accuracy, not good. I think arty would be a far more balanced class. So arty players hate this tank because it's probably the worst tier 7 arty, and that's because I think it's balanced. So it says a lot. It says a lot that people hate it because the tank has so many balancing factors compared to other arty that people hate it. Now, having said that, I've actually enjoyed my games in Lorraine. I find that the reload time, it's far nicer. There we go. Shot goes way, way too long, but I notice a super Pershing has popped up on the mini-map. I'm just moving back into cover so he doesn't spot me, but I find that the aim time is not painfully slow compared to other arty. I've played the M12, I finished with the M12 quite recently, just a few months ago, and I found the aim time was okay, but I prefer it on this tank. Hey! Finally the T-34 moves out of cover, and that's the highest roll we have managed to do this game, 373. So again, not very interesting at the moment. We've only got one tank left on the 5 line, the IS. I'm trying to support my team, trying to keep my gun focused where enemy tanks are at their thickest and our players are under most pressure. But again, a shot and a move on the T-54 Mod 1 misses. Now, the middle of the map is dead because our FCMs have suddenly decided, or our FCM has suddenly decided to retreat and go over to the other flank. So we've got 3 tanks left, all on the 7 line. We've got 2 TDs camping. I've moved behind the building, keeping an eye on the minimap just to try and stay safe. And as you can see, the reload is not painfully slow. So aim, 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 aim. Please sit, please sit, please sit. I should have fired here. And I have absolutely no idea where that shot went. I didn't see the tracer, so I don't know whether I hit the IS. But our FCM, nope, I don't think I hit the IS-6, so FCM has decided to advance alone, got himself into trouble. So yeah, it's still a 50-50 game. I'm on 1400 damage, and I haven't hit any blind tanks. So we still have 2 TDs now. Our 2 TDs did next to nothing. I mean, the Borsig has 2 kills, but what you're going to see in the rest of the game is that the Borsig might as well have just gone AFK at this point. So, oh dear. Our team are advancing and are dying. IS-6 is staying safe. So, FV appears over on the other flank. And this is what I was worried about. So I'm hoping... No, I'm not going to get shots here because the arty just doesn't have the shell velocity or shell trajectory to hit over the hill. So I'm trying to keep a building between myself and the FV. Okay, FV goes down to our TDs. Our last remaining tank has died in the south, our Tiger 88. So it's just me an AMX AC-48 who is top tier and sat at the back, and a Borsig who is top tier and sat at the back. So our Borsig continues to sit at the back. Our AC-48 has decided to move on, go on the attack. For some reason our IS is telling him to go find arty, which is rather amusing considering the AMX would need to drive through 2 enemy heavy tanks to get to enemy arty, but I was hoping he was going to hang back and let me get into a position to support him. But you can see we're doing 60 kilometers an hour here, and this is one of the reasons I love the arty. When it gets down to end game, it means you can actually relocate, you can run away, you can reposition. I'm hoping that the AMX stays alive long enough for me to be able to support him. Okay, arty is now being spotted. AMX takes out the IS-3, but IS-6 has got him in trouble. Don't have a shot in the M12. And there's that gun, that's what I mean, that's the gun depression. You've got 0 degrees of gun depression just because there was a slight rise between myself and the enemy arty. I had no shot. Red line to the enemy arty. So we're moving up, and now I'm in TD mode, so my view range is not good. Come on, come on. Risk taking a shot and then fall back. And as you can see, I don't have 6th sense. I don't think I have 6th sense. I've got a scrub crew. So I know I've been spotted. No 6th sense, but I know I've been spotted. So again, trying to get some acceleration. Trying to avoid the shot. Oh, and I get very lucky. I get very, very lucky. So my loader gets injured. I survive an HE shell from the IS-6. I think it hit my tracks. The IS-6 is reloaded. I put my loader back in. IS-6 is advancing, so my worry is enemy arty, so we're just going to set up an ambush. And again, I'm reversing my tank backwards up the slope so that basically I can get some gun depression. Because I'm on a slight rise, my gun will be pointing in the air, but IS-6 decides to poke. IS-6 dies. I move into cover, so there's kill number 3. So now it's just the M12. Now if you look at the minimap, our Borsig has just decided to go on a wonderful mystery tour. He's on full health. At any point he could have come up to try and support me, but nope, he sat at the back. So now that enemy arty has been spotted, our Borsig continues to move through the middle. Alrighty, so it's just me and the M12, plenty of wrecks. Look at all these wrecks here, so I'm just going to try and proxy spot the M12. I've got his speed beaten. There he is. And he's running away. So we're going to move down, and this is where the gun depression is a problem, and I figure I'm not going to get the gun depression. If that M12 comes around the corner, I'm not going to be able to hit him because I don't have the gun depression. So we're going to move uphill and try and point our gun down the hill to where the M12 is going to be coming from. So we've got the speed, and now it's just a matter of trying to find a spot where we can use the gun depression. So I've been spotted, and you can see how the gun is pointing up in the air. So I'm going to sit here, M12, go stealth, and then I notice he fires, so okay, he's mine now. So this tank unfortunately turns like a brick, so it turns so badly, but he was using the wreck for cover. But I do have a speed advantage and I do have a traverse advantage, even though the tank turns like a brick. He's got nowhere to run to. Just hope the gun depression. Get the gun down. Get the gun down. Have to move forward. And there we go. So, finally, it's over. So there you go, Lorraine 15550, probably the worst tier 7 arty in the game, and as a result, I think it is one of the most balanced arty in the game. So, as I say, regular players gonna hate this tank because it's arty. Arty players hate this tank because it's not very good, but The reason it's not very good is because it's balanced compared to other Tier 7 arty. It doesn't have huge alpha, doesn't have great penetration, has terrible splash damage, has terrible accuracy, no gun depression, the shell trajectory is terrible. I mean, it's probably the worst of its class in so many aspects. Even its view range is terrible compared to other tanks, but it's balanced in my opinion, and if all the other arty in the game shared the same characteristics as Lorraine 15550, the arty would be a far, far more balanced class. Remember, this was an ace tanker game, and the fact is that a lot of my shots missed by a mile, or a lot of my shots barely hit the target, and splash caused very, very low damage. So this is an arty that does roughly about 300 damage a shot, even against much, much less against heavily armored targets. So I think it's very, very balanced, even though people hate it. And it was the ace. I've got to play it, even if I don't like playing arty. So just the ace, no other medals. We didn't even come top. We finished second with 931 XP. FCM came first. 2,263 damage was all we managed to do for that. So again, it's obviously an arty that people hate because it's so inaccurate and does so little alpha, but that was enough for the ace. 4 kills. We fired 13 and only managed to land 6. There you go. I mean, this is an ace game, and we managed to land less than 50% of our shots. That's 0.78 accuracy for you. Splash damage, we managed to hit 6 tanks through splash damage, and that's the 6 shots. That's the 6 hits or penetrations, I believe. Yeah, so you know, it's not a great arty. Didn't spot any, obviously. Damaged 6, destroyed 4, and earned 20,000 credits. Wasn't firing any premium, obviously, just fire regular HE. The even firing premium HE doesn't give you any advantage whatsoever other than your splash. Radius is 1.5 meters bigger, which is next to nothing in World of Tanks. So yeah, Lorraine 15550 was a prototype, only one was ever built. It failed its tests, and Batchet ended up building the French artillery instead. But it's exactly the same tank as the Tier 8 15551, which I'll move on to eventually. Anyhow, congratulations to the winner of Town of Salem. I actually have no idea. I'm going to have to record that portion now. Thank you guys for watching. Sorry it's an arty replay, but Lorraine 15550, it's balanced. What can I say? I'll see you next time.